Welcome to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera.
Part 10, Chapter 37, Flying Through Hell. Do you know where to go? Rosalie tried not to glance at the dry, rocky ground far below, or the tiny people running around down there. Thank God Layla had a tight grip on her.
Yes, I spent a lot of time as an involuntary guest of the prison under the Adversary's palace,
Layla said in a distracted tone. That doesn't sound fun. Rosalie hoped that was the right thing to say. What does one say to something like that? Sorry to hear you were incarcerated just sounded wrong in her head, and she didn't want to think about how someone could contain a being as powerful as Layla for long. That was just frightening. And we're flying toward that man right now. Maybe I should think about something else. But she had nothing to do while they flew except worry about Ivarian and his mother and her own situation. How much time do I have to save Istiana and the past before it's too late? Probably not much, but hopefully enough time to stop the adversary, since his goals and Pristina's seem to be the same. I still can't believe that while I was untangling what changed my present and past, literal angels were trying to stop the same events from their side. It boggled her mind. But the angels had no reason to lie, so they must be telling the truth.
Hey,
Danielle waved to get her attention as she flew even with them.
something about your story doesn't make sense. How did you find out what Christina's plans were in time to stop her? She was a time goddess, so you'd think she'd choose the perfect time to act when no one would interrupt her.
Danielle stared at her like she was reading every micro-expression for clues. Rosalie might have left a few things out of her tale, like how she traveled back in time with help from Ivarian and what was really killing Istiana. She just wasn't sure how the angels would take any of that. But she needed to tell the angels something. Perhaps a version of the truth would do. I wanted to stop the demon invasion from happening, so that meant I needed to find the event that caused it. Rosalie stopped talking. That didn't sound too damning. Did Thania want to hear how she did that? I made a lot of wrong assumptions before I figured it out, but at the time she was only mortal, and she didn't know gods and goddesses existed anymore. So how could she have known what caused her timeline to go so awry? Should she mention having memories of two lives that were vastly different? That might confuse such a straightforward angel as Thaniel. Arjaniel might understand. He seemed like an angel with secrets and hidden depths.
How did you find out about that?
Daniel furrowed her brow as if she were trying and failing to figure that out, and she might have to tell her everything after all. I remembered a different life, so I assumed the moment the memories from those two lives diverged was the event I needed to stop. Rosalie paused. How much more should I say? She glanced at Layla for help, but the angel kept her narrowed eyes fixed on the sky ahead of them.
That's the part I don't understand. How did you find out when you were years in the future? How did you travel backward in time? We aren't part of any timeline, so I know Layla didn't help you with that. And you didn't replace Pristina until after you went back. So how did you do it?
Daniel stared at her again. I had help from Istiana's son. He can go backward in time, so he helped me. As to how we knew when to go back to, I figured it out from clues. Then I lost him, and I don't know where he is now. Rosalie stopped and shoved the strands from her fraying braid out of her eyes, because she really didn't want to talk about the versions of her from other timelines. That was just too weird, and she was glad they were gone. At least I saved the future for one of us. It was then, with the icy winds buffeting her, she realized the future she saved wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to a version of her that died when Layla shoved Pristina's time crystal into her chest, forcing her to take Pristina's place.
What's wrong?
Daniel reached across the space between them and clasped her cold hand. The angel's hand was warm, and some of its warmth seeped into her chilled fingers as the wind whipped past them. I just realized something that I should have realized before. Rosalie wiped her eyes to rid them of the tears pooling in them, but the tears kept coming. What will become of me now?
Things aren't as dark as they seem. We beat the adversary once, so we can do it again somehow. Have faith in us if you can't have faith in yourself.
Daniel said as she squeezed her hand again. It was something Rand might say, but she remembered him fading away and what Faye said about them merging back into the timeline. Was that the answer to her problem? Could I merge back into it and start over as a new version of me with Pristina's time crystal? So instead of a grown woman trapped outside of time like some discarded remnant of a timeline that no longer exists, I could have friends and family again? She'd have to ask Faye how to accomplish that. that, but just thinking about doing that stoked the fire of hope in her again. First, she needed to find out what happened to Avarian and save his mother. Then she could find some way to fade away and rejoin the timeline. A fortress under a glowing yellow dome appeared below her, and she stared at it. What is that place? Rosalie pointed.
That's my home, the Library of Forbidden Knowledge,
Argeniel said, and he sounded relieved to see it. He must be flying behind them, but close enough for conversation.
I want to see it when this is all over.
Azariah said, also from somewhere close behind them, and he sounded sincere. Though, could angels sound any other way?
Do you have anything that could help us stop the adversary in there?
Natali flew even with them on the other side of Layla. She held Uriah, but the ex-god kept his head down like he was praying. Maybe he wasn't a fan of heights. Rosalie didn't like them either. Feet belonged on the ground, especially hers. But flying was the fastest way to get around, and by all accounts, they needed that speed right now. So she tried not to let her unease show. Besides, she flew with 4 angels, and whatever Natali was, so if she fell, one of them would catch her. This was probably the safest flight she'd ever taken, and the only one.
I might. What do you think we'll need?
Argeniel sounded thoughtful. Hopefully he was running a mental inventory of all the magical items he collected in his fortress-like library. Do we have time for a tour? Rosalie hoped so. She'd love to wander through its aisles for a while and lose herself and her problems in a good book. But that probably had to wait since they flew over a city now, and its buildings showed signs of recent damage. Rocks and other debris littered the streets where walls collapsed.
That's where the gateway opened.
Daniel let go of her hand and pointed at an intersection that bore damage on all sides, like something exploded in its center. So that's where the demon invasion began. Rosalie never thought she'd see it. Then again, she never thought she'd ever fly with angels, let alone 4 of them at the same time.
I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I couldn't figure out how to collapse the gateway,
Argeniel said, and he sounded sorrier than anyone who ever apologized to her before. He really would have taken down that gateway if he could have found a way, and hearing that released some of her anger. Thank you for trying. Rosalie wiped her eyes again.
If you stopped Pristina, then shouldn't the timeline readjust so the invasion in your time never happened? I could be wrong since time doesn't affect us, and I know so little about it, but that seems plausible.
Daniel glanced at her as her words sank in. That's my hope, but I think we may need to stop the adversary first just to make sure he doesn't finish what Pristina started. Rosalie smiled, because if that's what happened, then her mom never died, Ran never lost his father, and her friends and family were back where they belonged, leading the lives they were supposed to lead before Pristina hijacked time and changed it to suit her needs. I just need to find some way to join them. With a jolt, she remembered what the other Rosalies from other timelines said in the Gray Between before they dragged her into the fog for a chat. We came from different timelines, and now we're all fading away because there can only be one Rosalie, the newly minted goddess of the present. It doesn't matter what choices we make. We all go back 20 years to the past and become you, because you're the only Rosalie who has a future now. What if I change that? Since she couldn't time travel anymore, perhaps she could find herself when she returned to the mortal world and give that young girl Pristina's time crystal. Then she could grow up as a goddess, and Mom would definitely adjust her attitude if she put on too many airs. Maybe then I could fade away and grow up again, make friends with Rand, find Ivarian, and live my life. If there could only be one of her, then she'd be the best version possible and the sanest.
What is that?
Daniel pointed at a dark ring that appeared around a palatial building made of white marble.
Hey, that's probably the adversary's plan in motion,
Uriah said, as that ring extruded and became a dark cylinder around the palace that kept growing.
This place is finite. What will happen when that thing hits the upper limit of hell? Will it punch through the shield over this place?
Argeniel asked, and he sounded worried, but he still followed them, so she couldn't see him unless she turned her head into the wind.
Can it do that?
Daniel studied the thing, but she didn't rush on ahead.
The last gateway did.
Natali shrugged, because anything was possible right now, since they didn't know what the adversary's plan was.
But that one originated in the Gray Between, and that place is weird.
Daniel just had to point out. That's so true. Rosalie suppressed a shudder at the thought of that place. I'll probably have to see it one more time just to reach the mortal world. And that was too many times, in her opinion. Hopefully, all the smoking elephants will be busy doing other things, so I don't need to talk to them on my return trip.
Is that the gateway?
Azariah asked. Didn't he see the last one? His question indicated that he hadn't, but he was very attached to Arjanil. Didn't they fight the gateway together? Rosalie bit her tongue to keep from asking. It was none of her business, but she really wanted to know. Was there a polite way to ask about that?
It might be a gateway. It's tube-shaped like one, and a gateway is just a magical tunnel connecting two or more realms.
Layla said finally, so she wasn't ignoring them. She was too quiet for too long, leaving Rosalie to wonder if Layla was thinking about her time imprisoned in the Adversary's palace. He probably wasn't a nice jailer.
If it is a gateway, then where is it going? Which realms is he trying to connect to this time?
Daniel asked, and that was the most important question.
He can't connect to anything except the Grey Between, because that place sits on top of hell, and you have to go through that foggy realm to get to anywhere else. It's not called the Grey Between for no reason. It's literally between everything.
Layla adjusted her grip on Rosalie after her lecture, and the move made it hard to see her face. Was Layla okay?
What are those sparkly bits swirling around the dark tubular thing? I don't remember the last gateway having them.
Natalie pointed at them.
I don't know, but they're probably not a good thing.
Uriah grimaced, like he regretted coming with them.
So how do we stop it? I'd prefer to destroy it utterly, since stopping it implies an interruption, and something that stops can always restart. I'd rather that didn't happen. Anyone have any ideas?
Daniel turned and hovered in front of all the flyers. That was the question they were all thinking. But what was the answer? What if it's not a gateway? The angels were convinced it was one. So Rosalie pressed her lips together and didn't ask, because what did she know about them? Nothing, really. She'd never seen a gateway before, just the demons that came through one many years before, and they were bad enough. But the question repeated in her head, what if it's not a gateway?
Chapter 38. Save the Library. Not another gateway. Haven't we dealt with enough of them already? Arjanil rubbed his eyes in case there was something in them causing him to hallucinate the dark columnar thing wobbling as it grew like some invisible force tugged on it.
Well, does anyone have any ideas?
Daniel asked again, even though no one answered her the first time. Arjanil let his hands fall back to his side. Was the thing that might be a gateway falling? It leaned more and more as it extruded from the adversary's palace. If it fell, where would it land? It only took a moment to figure that out, since it cast a shadow across a large swath of the city and the main building of the library.
Is it supposed to do that?
Natalie pointed at the gateway spell. It was 100 times darker than the previous one and seemed to be made of darkness and a viscous black liquid. The only other gateway he'd ever encountered was made of light and fire. Why were they made of different things? And why were there pinpoints of white light swirling around the giant tubular spell? It looked like a funnel cloud reaching for the glowing orange sky above. Oh no, not again. Arjanil couldn't believe it. As the spell toppled and its top end fell toward his library, everything circled back where it began. Or it seemed that way. No, Arjanil flew toward the gold semi-transparent dome over the Library of Forbidden Knowledge. Was the shield he cast over it strong enough to withstand a gateway spell landing on it? Probably not, so he flew under the falling spell structure and extended his hands. Maybe I can push it away? He couldn't last time, but this spell was dark and it didn't glow. Maybe it was lighter than the last one.
What are you doing?
Azariah asked as he wrapped his arms around Arjanil's waist. I'm stopping it from landing on my library. Arjanil braced for impact as the spell fell toward him. Its shadow cloaked everything in darkness, making his halo and eyes glow brighter to dispel it. Last time he tried this, fire burned his hands and arms, and only his angelic nature kept him from becoming extra crispy. This time, when the spell structure struck his palms, it froze his hands and the breath in his lungs as it pushed him down, because in this accursed place, his quasi-physical body needed air. Arjanil flapped his wings and tried to push the cylindrical spell upward, but he sank lower instead. How close was it to the roof of the library's 4 towers? He glanced over his shoulder to check as the gateway spell leaned harder on him. Was the damned thing still growing? growing. It looked longer than before, but that might just be the angle playing tricks on his eyes. Azariah tightened his grip around Arginil's waist and pressed hard against his back.
You can't do this alone. Let me help you.
You want to save the library? Arginil pushed harder, but the gateway didn't budge, not even a smidgen.
Of course I do. It obviously means a lot to you, and you can't give me a tour if this spell flattens it, so we should avoid that.
Azariah slid an arm free and extended it past his shoulder so he could set his palm against the spell. Don't do that, it'll freeze your hand. Arginil shifted his shoulder to knock Azariah's hand away.
Then let it freeze. The cold can't kill us, so it'll heal.
Azariah reached past him again, this time with both arms, but he stayed behind him, so his chest pressed into Arginil's back, and his arms were on either side of Arginil, caging him, and he didn't mind that at all. You're crazier than Azrael, Arginil said, because he didn't know what else to say.
I'm only crazy for you, I assure you. If you were Azrael, I would be over there watching from a safe distance.
Azariah said, and his lips brushed Arginil's ear each time he spoke, sending shivers down his back that had nothing to do with the cold wafting off the spell that bore down on them like it wanted to flatten them, too. Sweat beaded on Arginil's forehead as he poured every ounce of his strength into his wings and his arms to push the spell away. But he and Azariah lost altitude as the gateway pressed down harder on them, and the distance to the gold shield arching over the library dwindled until his sandals struck it. How much weight can the shield hold? Arginil feared it couldn't hold enough to stop the spell, since he didn't design it with that in mind. It was just meant to keep people at ground level out.
Did you cast the shield? Of course you did. This is your library.
I don't think it can withstand this kind of weight, though. It wasn't designed for an aerial assault, because there weren't many who could fly in hell. Among the rank-and-file fallen, Arginil was the only flyer.
How much weight can the roof of the main building hold, and why does it look like a keep? What do you have inside that you need a fortress to guard it?
Azariah asked, and his breath tickled Arginil's ear, and he tried not to squirm. I don't know how strong it is. It's solid stone from the foundation to the roof because there are plenty of rocks just lying around. Arginil pushed, but his arms trembled from the exertion. The spell pushed back, and his shaking knees bent.
Let's find out.
Azariah wrapped both arms around his waist and yanked him sideways. Then he fell away from the spell. What if it pancakes? Arginil struggled to break his grip, but Azariah squeezed harder so he couldn't squirm out of his arms.
Then I'll build you a new library and I'll help you fill it.
You do that for me. Arginil froze as he waited for an answer. His heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't know why, because he didn't need it to circulate blood. His default state wasn't this quasi-physical body, and he didn't really have blood, just a facsimile made from his spirit, and he was thinking way too much about this while he waited for a reply. Azariah sighed.
Yeah, I guess I should have built you one, but we wouldn't be here now, and I'm enjoying this. It's certainly entertaining.
Azariah rested his chin on Arginil's shoulder. You have strange ideas about entertainment. Arginil shook his head, then risked a glance at the library as the shield shattered. Glowing shards rained down on Arginil as they landed, and Azariah let go. While he reabsorbed the magic in them, Azariah stepped back to give him space as promised, and that was both a relief, and it sent a pang of regret through Arginil. He missed having Azariah so close. It was closer than they'd ever been before. Above, the spell crashed into the towers and they buckled, sending stones flying. Then it slammed into the roof of the main keep-like building. Please hold! Arginil willed it to bear that weight and not break. But the spell swelled outward, becoming twice as wide, and the increase in mass doomed the roof. It crashed inward, raining debris on the top level. Was anyone in there when it fell? Arginil ran toward the doors. They should still be bolted from inside, but they swung inward and outspilled the demons and lost souls who lived in the library with him. It was a relief to see them all looking well, even if some were covered in dust from the collapse. But they all skidded to a halt and stared at him and Azariah like they'd never seen an angel before. They probably hadn't, or not one in full splendor. Oh, right, Only a few of them saw me in my true form after Thaniel broke the glamour. Arginil averted his eyes. He didn't want to see their reactions.
Aren't you going to introduce me to your staff?
Azariah elbowed him in the side. That broke the impasse, and everyone talked at once about the damage, or asked about the swirling black thing leaning on the library like it was trying to devour it. Arginil raised both hands and waved them to get everyone's attention. Quiet. The adversary casts that thing. We think it's a gateway spell, and we need to stop it from completing and destroying the library. A flash blinded Arginil, and a wall of force knocked him backward into Azariah. When he could see again, the gateway spell divided into two columns that twisted around each other, forming a double helix that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy he could feel but not see.
What is that?
Azariah stayed close to him, and this time he didn't mind that at all. I don't know. Arginil staggered for a moment until he regained his balance. The last gateway spell fed off holy relics, but it glowed white. This one didn't. What fed it? Uriah said the adversary planned to break apart time crystals for their power. What kind of power was inside them? What could it do? Another explosion shoved him backward into Azariah again, and this time he grabbed hold of his friend as the wind howled and swirled around them. When the after-images faded, Arginil looked up. The library still stood, but the gateway spell ripped a hole in the fabric of reality above it. Through it, chaos swirled into a pool of absolute darkness.
What in the name of the Creator is that?
But Arginil could only stare and shake his head in mute horror. He never saw anything like that, and he never wanted to see it again. Then the darkness lashed out with a matte black tentacle and wrapped it around his ankle. The creature yanked him off his feet and dragged him toward its hungry maw.
Chapter 39. It's hammer time.
Is it supposed to do that?
Matali pointed at the falling magical tube thing that could be a gateway. Why is it doing that? Thaniel never saw a gateway while it was under construction. She didn't know what it should look like, but it probably wasn't supposed to tip over like that and flatten part of the city.
I don't think it should do that.
Rosalie said, well, we can't stop it if we just hover here. Thaniel shrugged. She wasn't much of a planner. Since the caster was at the bottom end of the spell tunnel thing, Thaniel dived for the ground near the palace. Rosalie screamed. Since Layla carried her, Thaniel didn't glance behind her to see why the human-turned goddess lost her cool. Besides, Layla was a capable angel. She could handle one newly minted goddess who probably didn't know how to use her powers yet.
What's the plan?
Layla asked. She must have followed her down. Good. Magic was her thing. Thaniel was here to clobber whoever needed clobbering, so she extended her hand and summoned her warhammer. We barge in and tell the adversary to knock it off. That had the best chance of provoking him, too, and that might be why Thaniel liked the plan so much. She was a direct sort of angel who didn't like all that bandying about with words when a good threat would do. She just didn't know what to threaten the adversary with. Long ago, he was cut off from the source of all grace and goodness and barred from heaven. What more could she do to him if he didn't stop erecting a gateway? He was more powerful than her, so she couldn't destroy him. Could he destroy her? Nah. Arginil survived for thousands of years under his reign. If he could do that, then I can survive another run-in with the Prince of Hell. Thaniel slowed at the last instant and dropped gracefully onto the grass next to the outer wall of the gateway spell, and cold wafted off it. Was that normal? She didn't remember the last gateway having any kind of temperature, but maybe that was normal. Thaniel glanced down to make sure she still had her armor. She did. Unlike the armor that mortals wore, hers was as comfortable as her robes, since it was made of a flexible and strong substance that looked like metal.
Are you sure about this?
Layla released Rosalie and the girl straightened her dress, but she didn't run away. Layla stayed in her white robes instead of calling for her armor. Maybe she didn't have any. Only warrior angels received special armor. What class of angel did Layla belong to? Danielle put that question aside because angels' robes were tough too, and answered Layla, yeah, we have to confront him. I just can't think of anything to threaten him with. He's already in hell.
We could throw him into the abyss, but I don't know if that would even harm him.
Layla kicked the swirling smoke that formed the spell architecture at its base, but her foot went right through it. Well, that might make deconstructing it hard if the thing wasn't solid all the way through. Daniel punched it just to test her theory, and her fist struck something several feet inside the gateway's outer wall. So part of it was solid and punchable, but perhaps her first plan was the better one. If they caused the caster to disrupt the spell, then it should fall apart on its own and no one needed to know how to break it up.
Will the abyss harm us if we get close to it? What exactly is is this abyss? I still don't understand it.
Rosalie folded her arms and stuck her hands in her armpits, probably to warm them. And that was weird because she was wearing a dress over a long-sleeved tunic and trousers, and she likely wore undergarments beneath that. Shouldn't all those layers keep her warm? Rosalie wasn't a skinny waif who could blow away in a stiff breeze. There was some meat on her bones. But she was human before she became a goddess, so maybe that remnant of her mortality made her cold. Daniel pushed those questions aside. She wouldn't let her natural curiosity get in the way. Afterward, she could interrogate the girl about her situation and how it changed her.
It'll change you if you get too close.
Layla finally said. She squared her shoulders and marched away from them into the cloud of glowing white particles surrounding the giant cylinder of darkness.
Where are you going?
Rosalie chased after her, but she paused before entering the spinning cloud of glowing things. After a moment, Rosalie plunged into it, so Thaniel didn't slam into her back. The gateway spell was so dark, she couldn't see the palace it surrounded. It seemed to eat all the light falling on it from the glowing particles in the orange sky. Supposedly, the adversary was in the middle of that thing. Maybe Layla had some idea about how to go through the wall of the spell. If not, I've got my trusty hammer, so I can just hammer my way through. Daniel rested its handle against her shoulder.
I'm looking for a way in. Is that hammer just for show, or can you make us a way inside?
Layla waved to it when Thaniel drew even with her. Sure, should I just hit it anywhere? Daniel hefted her warhammer. Its hammering end was bigger than her head and hard enough to smash through just about anything.
Let me look.
Layla stared at the swirling darkness standing in front of them.
Look out.
Rosalie grabbed her arm and Thaniel's and pulled them both aside as the shadow of the falling tubular spell blotted out everything. They stepped clear of it as the spell tunnel stopped. Now it leaned at a 45-degree angle. What stopped it from falling flat on the ground? Thaniel turned and looked for its other end, but she couldn't see it anymore. How long is this damned spell? She asked aloud by accident. The previous gateway just had a doorway in hell and another one in the gray between, then a long glowing tunnel in between them. But that tunnel was tucked out of sight somewhere in the starry blackness between realms. Why didn't this one follow that pattern?
I don't know, but I've never built a gateway before.
Layla quit trying to see the other end and marched away again.
Where are you going now?
Rosalie ran past Thaniel and probably went after Layla. Faniel tried for another moment to see the end of the spell. It must have an end. But it went on and on, seemingly without one. Something was wrong with the spell, or the adversary was still erecting it. Either way, she should do something about it. So she turned and bounded after Rosalie and Layla in time to catch the other angel's reply.
I'm looking for a way inside. Since it's tipped over, it may have exposed a hole we can use.
Layla broke into a run, and her white robe streamed after her, since her version had a lot of unnecessary fabric. She definitely wasn't a warrior-class angel, or her angel's whites would be less flowy and more streamlined, with shorter hems like Rosalie's earth-toned garments. Now those Thaniel could fight in, but Thaniel didn't need to fight in angel's robes since she had her armor, and she was glad to have it since clobbering was still at the top of her to-do list as soon as she found someone to clobber. Layla ran like she could find an entrance if she moved fast enough, so Thaniel hustled to catch up in time to skid to a halt as a tentacle shot out of the darkness, swirling around the hidden palace.
What is that?
Rosalie pointed at it as she backed away in horror. Finally, something I can smash. Thaniel ran up to the tentacle and struck it with her hammer, stunning the thing. But a second tentacle shot out of the spell and slammed into her stomach, knocking her down. The impact traveled across her back, but it didn't hurt. It just felt weird to interact so much with her surroundings. She wasn't used to that since she spent a lot of time in heaven doing the Council of Angels' bidding.
Give me a minute and I'll tell you.
Layla seemed to grab her shadow and pull it over herself. Then she vanished. Was that supposed to happen? Thaniel sat up and swung her hammer at another tentacle while a third one wrapped around her ankle and pulled.
I don't know,
Rosalie said. Then she grunted like something struck her. What could have hit her? Thaniel stood between the girl and all the tentacles. There was no one else here except the adversary and whatever goons he had left. But the adversary was inside the gateway spell, wasn't he? A bad feeling sliced through Thaniel, but she couldn't glance behind her. Rosalie, are you all right? She asked as she slammed her hammer down onto the tentacle that pulled on her ankle. Rosalie didn't answer. Another woman did, and she wasn't anyone Thaniel had ever met before.
Rosalie can't talk to you right now.
Why not? Thaniel struck another tentacle, but a fourth one wrapped around her other ankle, and they hoisted her up by her ankles like they thought she had to obey an annoying thing like gravity. That force might make a mortal's tentacle's hammer harder to lift, but not hers. She bent at her waist and swung her hammer at one tentacle, then another, and repeated that until something wrapped around her arm and yanked one hand off her hammer. She glanced down at the woman who had an unconscious Rosalie slung over her shoulder, and Thaniel still didn't recognize her. The woman had dark hair and angry eyes that were a brownish color and a gaping hole in her chest crusted with dried blood. But that was the look the dead often wore in hell, so she would fit in just fine here. "Who are you?" Thaniel asked, and what did the woman want with Rosalie?
You can call me Pristina, former ex-goddess of the present and prisoner of time, but not for much longer.
Christina grinned too widely, and her face seemed to stretch to accommodate that mad grin.
I don't think you'll need this where you're going.
Christina stretched up on her toes and reached for the hammer, dangling forgotten in Thaniel's other hand. No way would she let some crazy upstart, ex-goddess, take her hammer. Thaniel clutched it with all her might and glared at Pristina as the woman tried to pry it out of her hands. She finally gave up and slapped Thaniel, but it didn't hurt, so Thaniel smiled sweetly at her. "Did I mess up your little plan?"
Smile while you can.
Christina pressed her lips together to keep from saying more. Her eyes flashed with hatred as she spun on her heel and waved for the tentacles to follow her. Then she stepped into the swirling darkness. The tentacles yanked Thaniel in after her, into a darkness not even her glowing eyes could light. "I might be in trouble. I hope Arjanil and Natalie are doing better than I am. If not, then this might have dire consequences for wherever the adversary was trying to go."
Chapter 40, Against the Voice. Cold dread slid through her veins as Natalie hovered over the city. I don't want to go to the palace. All their courage drained out of them as they stared at the base of the spinning black cloud that looked more like a tornado than a gateway. But they'd only seen one gateway before this, and that one was already built when they saw it, and it originated somewhere else. So it may have looked exactly like this when the caster started constructing the spell. Natalie wasn't a mage, and this was high magery at work on a scale they'd never seen before, but staring at it wouldn't get rid of it, or stop whatever it was trying to do. Natalie couldn't stop staring at it, even after Thaniel and Layla dived toward its expanding base. Were gateways supposed to get wider as they got taller?
Aren't we following them?
Uriah asked. We should do that, but Natalie hesitated for a moment more, as fear gripped them at the thought of getting anywhere near the adversary, or the seat of his power. That hesitation might just have saved them because the gateway fell toward them. Natalie flew away from the city, but that damned spell cast a long shadow. No matter how fast Natalie flew, they couldn't outrun it.
What will happen if that spell hits us? Do you know? Does it have mass like a collapsing tower? Can it crush us if it lands on us?
Uriah asked as he dangled in their grip. I don't know, but I really don't want to find out. Natalie reconfigured their wings to be more muscular, but it wasn't enough. That damned spell still fell faster than they could fly. I need to drop some mass, but how? They couldn't drop Uriah. He didn't have wings, so he couldn't fly, and the ground was an awful long way away, far enough to break his bones at the very least.
Can you fly faster?
No, I'm at the limit of how fast I can go, at least while carrying someone, but since dropping him wasn't an option, Natalie didn't mention that.
Then can I try something?
Sure. If there's something you can do, go ahead and do it before that spell hits us, because Natalie was out of ideas.
Okay, keep flying in a straight line. I think I can teleport us out of its reach?
Uriah said as the world whited out. When the white light faded, Natalie flew over the rocky barren plain outside the city, but more important than that, they were out of the path of that spell since Uriah teleported them well south of it. Thank you. Natalie slowed and turned a wide circle until they faced the giant tornado-looking spell, and they braced, fully expecting it to slam into the ground and send rocks and earth flying. But it didn't hit the ground. Something prevented it. Natalie squinted along its length. What held the spell up?
Well, that's interesting.
Uriah said as they hovered there, staring at the sideways tornado. Then the damned thing split into two halves and they twisted around each other. Dark lines shot out from them both. What the hell is it doing now? Natalie asked, but Uriah just shook his head because he didn't know either.
Come, demons, to your dark father fly. Embrace your dark side. At my side, your time is nigh,
whispered the adversary. No, I don't work for you. I will never do your bidding. Natalie wanted to press both hands to their ears to block out his voice, but they'd have to put Uriah down to free up their hands to do that, and the ground seemed like a dangerous place to be right now.
Come, demons, to your dark father fly. Embrace your dark side. At my side, your time is nigh,
Whispered the adversary again, this time in their mind. No, I served the sleeping angel and the demons in exile. Well, Natalie wanted to work with them. Since teaming up with Arjanil and Thaniel, they hadn't heard from the sleeping angel at all, and that was concerning. But it wasn't something Natalie could do anything about right now, not when they'd lost track of all their new friends.
Come, demons, to your dark father fly. Embrace your dark side. At my side, your time is nigh,
Whispered the adversary, and this time his beautiful voice called to Natalie. I must fly to him. No, I won't serve him. Natalie shook their head and flapped their wings as fast as they could. I must get away from him. I won't be his pawn ever again. But the tiny figures below her would become his pawns, because they broke into a run. Natalie stared at them. Something about them niggled at them. Where did all those creatures come from? The answer was as important as flying away from the adversary.
Where are you going? The adversary is that way.
Uriah shouted over the wind as he pointed behind them. Natalie slowed their mad flight away from the adversary and his voice as they realized who the running creatures below them must be. They were the army of demons, fallen angels, and ex-gods the dragons chased back to hell. Where's Guerren? Is he still with them? Could the adversary call him too? Natalie had to find out. Hold on, we're going down.
Why? What's down there?
Uriah scanned the ground but must not have realized what Natalie had, because he scowled at them. That's an army down there, and Guerren wanted to command it, so he must be down there too. Natalie scanned the running creatures as they descended. The adversary kept calling, but having a goal helped Natalie ignore his commands to follow him. Could Guerren wrest control of the army away from the adversary? It was worth trying, even if that only delayed the army. But first they needed to find Guerren. Where is he? He hates running long distances. Natalie flew over the plain, checking every creature for him, but there was no sign of Guerren. He must be here, unless he's lying somewhere passed out. Where are you, Guerren? Could they have missed him in the gray between? No. The army is here, and so is he. I just have to check every creature and I'll find him, eventually. But would Natalie find him in time to make a difference? I can't worry about that right now. Thaniel and Arjanil are tough angels. They'll hold on because they have to. I can't risk getting any closer or the adversary's voice may overpower my will. If that happened, then Natalie couldn't help anyone at all. So this was the best thing they could do for their friends right now. I must find Guerren. Natalie flew onward an arm's length above the ragged rows of running creatures, and not a single one glanced up, even though they must see the shadow Natalie cast. They had one goal, to reach the adversary, and nothing would interfere with that. Well, I have one goal too now. Natalie flew in widening circles, still holding onto Uriah, and the ex-god of the underworld was quiet, as he also scanned the creatures below. Did he hear the adversary calling all ex-gods too? Natalie wanted to ask, but then they'd have to admit they heard the adversary's call too, and they just couldn't do that right now. Ignoring his call to search for Guerren took all Natalie's concentration. Later they would ask, because there would be a later when they were both free of that ex-archangel. Come on, Guerren, show yourself. You aren't this good at hiding. So where was he?
You've been listening to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem, and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.